Oh my god, did that just actually happen? Holy crap, without any warning and any invite or any cringy investor day or shareholder meetings, Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford Motor Company, and Elon Musk got together on a Twitter Spaces and just said, hey, let's forever correct the trajectory towards electric vehicles, and Ford announced they are switching to the North America Charging Standard. This is so fun to say. I've been advocating for this for months. I've been pushing all automakers to switch, and honestly, I was kind of losing a lot of hope there because no one had really announced anything other than, of course, Aptera, who's been advocating and planning on using the Tesla connector since the very beginning. But I do have to give some massive credit to them because it was Aptera originally that was pushing Tesla and the US government to make the North America Charging Standard the official standard that all electric vehicles use because CCS sucks so bad, and it's so great to hear Ford and Jim Farley acknowledge that themselves publicly. Aptera kind of kickstarted this movement, but of course they are a startup, they don't have vehicles on the road yet. It's a much bigger deal. Like, this is the last piece of the puzzle, in my opinion, getting legacy automakers on board, and Ford, by the way, is a huge one. They've been selling the best-selling vehicle in the United States for the past 40 years, the F-150, and to have Ford themselves, which is very close behind all the other non-Tesla EVs out there. I'm pretty sure the Chevy Bolt was in second place, but of course they're not making the Chevy Bolt anymore. Now that Ford is acknowledging that yes, we need to move forward with Tesla Superchargers, we need to rely on them, and we need to switch to the North America Charging Standard, this puts tremendous pressure on the rest of the industry now too, because now not only Tesla is using NACS, of course, because Tesla designed it in the first place, and there's more Teslas on the road than anybody else. Tesla's outproducing all other electric vehicle automakers, but Ford, they dominate the total vehicle market for now, at least in North America. So now that you've got a major legacy automaker using it and the biggest EV player using it, yeah, now you're basically, in my opinion, gonna look like a colossal idiot if you try to stick around with CCS and go, well, you know, Electrify America's pretty good. It's not very good. Just follow Rate Your Charge. It's basically an unintentional Tesla supercharging ad, because that's really all the data did when we looked at it was, hey, all these CCS stations kinda suck, and all of these Tesla supercharger stations don't suck. So let's stop sucking when we're trying to convince people to switch to electric vehicles and just use our brains for 2 fractions of a second. So yeah, logistics. Let's talk about a little bit of the details. I listened to the whole thing, and the timeline, I do appreciate them getting pretty specific on. So for one, even Ford vehicles that are already equipped with the CCS connector are gonna be able to access a new adapter that Tesla's making. And none of the questions on the call were very good. That's part of the downside of Twitter Spaces. You get just a bunch of random questions about roadsters and how Ford is gonna work with the dealer network and all that kind of thing. But Tesla is apparently in development of this adapter right now, which will let you go from NACS connector to CCS on the other end, essentially a magic dock, but something that you can take with you so that existing Ford vehicles will be able to access the entire Tesla supercharger network, even though they don't have the NACS port on their vehicle themselves. And Ford is saying you'll be able to activate those superchargers through the Ford mobile app, so that means some kind of API that Tesla's opening up and letting Ford have access to. So I assume that's how they're preventing anybody from being able to buy this magic dock. You know, if you have a Chevy Bolt and you buy this dock and you try to put it on a supercharger and plug in your car, you're not going to have the proper app to activate the supercharger, even though physically it should technically all fit. Like, you should be able to buy that magic dock, put it on a supercharger and plug it into your Bolt, but you just won't have a way to activate it. Unless Tesla has some secret special way of ensuring that the only people who can buy this magic dock are verified, like Ford customers. Maybe you have to provide your VIN or something before they sell it to you. I'm not entirely sure what they're gonna do, but Elon mentioned on the call that it should be reasonably affordable, somewhere around a couple $100. So I don't think it will be $50, but I also don't think it'll be $500 to $1,000. It's probably gonna be very similar in size and hardware to the CCS combo adapter, which is around $250. So Ford customers, I think your vehicles just instantly became way more valuable within an hour simply because of one Twitter Spaces event. Because yes, this means that pretty much all F-150 Lightnings will be able to access any supercharger, not just the ones that have magic docks equipped. And then the more exciting news that's more of a long-term shift, but still one I'm excited for, that Jim Farley mentioned, is that early 2025, Ford is going to start actually accommodating for the NACS connector in their vehicles, so you won't need to buy that adapter in the future. You'll just theoretically be able to pull up to any Tesla supercharger or a destination charger, and the connector connector will fit in your Ford vehicle. What they didn't entirely explain that maybe they haven't figured out yet is if the supercharging stall will need to be activated through the app. If the Ford vehicle already has NACS connected to it, that I'm not entirely sure on quite yet. So I think it would be really cool if Tesla made the communication protocol that goes between the Tesla supercharger and the vehicle open source, or at least open to Ford in this case, who is accommodating for NACS, so that ideally, I think the best case scenario would be you just pull up in your F-150 or your Ford T3 project, whatever that ends up being, and you can just take the supercharger cable, plug it into the car, and it just knows to start charging. That would be ideal because that would emulate the Tesla experience the most, but I didn't hear them explicitly say that. All I heard them say was that all the Ford EVs from 2025 and onward will no longer require a CCS adapter. You'll just be able to plug into the existing supercharger network. But still, even if you have to activate it through the app, this is still huge news, and it gets me really, really excited, and I just want to give massive, massive props in today's video to Jim Farley. He was so optimistic on the call, and I thought he was just making so much sense to acknowledge that, yeah, we're early in this EV transition. You know, it's not too late to make switches and make adjustments to better the rollout of electric vehicles. And in my opinion, it takes a big man to acknowledge that, hey, we're using a current connector and it's not all that great, so we're going to adopt the superior connector. We're going to work with another automaker, which many people would look at, oh, this is Tesla's competition, but Jim and Elon are willing to both admit that, hey, we're in the car business, but at the end of the day, we all want to move forward with electric vehicles, and Tesla is trying to help other automakers in any way they can, and this is one of the best ways they can do that. So there's like 3 crucial members that made this whole open supercharger network future possible, and in my opinion, it starts, of course, with Tesla, because they made the connector in the first place, but then Aptera entered the picture and said, hey, we really need this to be open so that everybody can access it, and the US government should mandate it. But the last piece of the puzzle that's really, really important is getting legacy automakers on board, and Ford, being a major player in the legacy automaker space, adopting it, I think, is just going to hopefully cause a domino effect. Now, the pressure is on VW, the pressure is on GM, and of course the pressure is freaking on you, Lucid. There is literally no reason, in my opinion, to keep selling CCS on your vehicles, or at least you guys should announce a plan of some kind to bring NACS support to your vehicles, or do what Ford's doing and say, we're gonna sell an adapter so that non-Teslas can access any supercharger. Other bit of detail that I was curious to hear about but didn't was the NACS port location on Ford's vehicles. You know, we already know that the Ford vehicles in production now put CCS in kind of an awkward place, so the rollout of these adapters may result in some superchargers getting clogged up and busy because the charging cable on the charging stall is not long enough to reach and have the Ford park in the proper space. So my hope is that from 2025 and onward, Ford will put the NACS connector in the driver's side back taillight area, so that way you can charge all of your Ford vehicles and not occupy multiple stalls. And I'm sure many of us Tesla owners out there are already nervous, like, oh crap, next year the supercharger network's gonna get really bad because Ford's gonna flood our network with all these adapters, and now there's gonna be Mach-E's and F-150 Lightnings taking up multiple stalls. But the good news is Ford, relatively speaking, is not building yet as many EVs as Tesla is, and because Tesla's putting up a new supercharger location every 12 hours, and that's reportedly going to be increasing as they build out more of their network, that means that the likelihood of there being enough Ford vehicles to completely clog up a supercharger is probably pretty low. And long term, I hope that they've thought about cable length and charge port location, of course, because that's going to cause issues if they just try to put NACS in the exact same place that they have CCS now. The other question that rightfully did get brought up was a question of charging speeds, in which they didn't get too specific other than the charging speed is going to be limited by whatever the adapter is capable of doing or whatever the vehicle is capable of taking. And the good news is Mach-E and F-150 Lightning already kind of cap out at around 150 kilowatts anyway, so most superchargers I think will be able to sustain that. So I think you'll get close to peak speeds with these vehicles because they're on a lower voltage architecture in the first place. Once the Ford T3 project comes out, which is basically Ford's version of the Cybertruck, that's rumored to be on the higher voltage architecture, and that will probably get to take advantage of V4 superchargers being able to charge it up at 500 kilowatts or maybe more, who knows. But I still think that this is a crucial moment in EV history, at least in the United States of America, where the US government hasn't decided on a standard connector, so we've just kind of been left to what the companies decide for us. And clearly, both thanks to the peak charging speeds, the simplicity simplicity, the locking mechanism, the compactness of the NACS connector, I think it is just objectively the superior port, and it's so encouraging to see a massive automaker like Ford adopt NACS in their vehicles, and I can't wait for the future of EVs, hopefully to be a lot more seamless where you don't have to worry about adapters and CCS connectors and all that. You know, we're still relatively early in this whole transition, and now I think there's a much greater chance that in 5, 10, or 20 years, you won't even think about the connector anymore. You'll just be able to go out, buy an EV, and drive it to any old Supercharger or any old other electric vehicle charger, and it'll have the same port. It'll plug in and just start charging, which is the way it should be. This was the domino we needed, I think, to switch to NACS, and I'm really hopeful that we see more automakers switch moving forward. Who do you guys think is gonna be next? I'm having a hard time believing that Ford is gonna be the last automaker to say they're gonna switch to NACS. So who do you think is going to pony up and admit, yes, this is the better connector, let's move on to it, let's access that superior supercharger network? Feel free to speculate along with me down in the comments below, and thank you to everybody supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps us out a ton, as does just watching these videos, so thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.